everybody. Geopolitics of strategic partners. And this is a response on, we put up a mini course on the geopolitics of American 2020 election. And so we're putting this together because we got probably about 82 questions from people. And a lot of the questions were about the same thing. So we wanted to, it's like, what are people getting and what are people not getting? And we'll, make it a little bit easier for you guys. So the geopolitics of strategic partners. So if you guys remember that, if you look at the blue, that's the prize. The prize is Eurasia because that's where most of the resources and most of the manpower. And again, I have to remind people that there's plenty of resources and manpower all over the planet, but what's the biggest chunk and what resources can you get that's the closest to the biggest chunk of manpower that's out there? And so that's what geopolitics does. Measuring that helps create a geopolitical strategy. And so if you look at this map, it's no different for Russia, China, or the United States, or even the British Empire when it was around. Okay. So, but think about this though. What did we talk about? We learned through the Russians that it's the strategic partnership. So in chronological order, from World War I, we learned that the British Empire, they could not have Germany and Russia get together. That wasn't a reason in itself to start a war, but that was one of the reasons. The other reason was, remember that Germany said they're going to build a railroad from Baghdad to Berlin. You guys have to understand, how did the British Empire become a world power? They became a world power through their navy. And so when railroads came along, that was a competition. So it was navies versus infantry, cavalry, caravans. Well, obviously you can move through the sea a lot quicker, and the price-wise, tonnage-wise, a lot cheaper. So that's how the British Empire became a world power, was because of their naval might. All right, they can only go so far into that red, the heartland, because they wouldn't have any support. Now they're, further they got into the heartland, the more and more that the tribes and countries that were in the heartland, it became more and more equal. But railroad tracks and getting all that stuff, that changed everything. So they had to stop that, the British Empire. So there was two threats. One, they couldn't let Russia and Germany get together. And by the way, it's on both sides of the coin. In other words, they couldn't let Russia take over Germany, and they could not let Germany take over Russia. And so you have to kind of think, three-dimensional chess that way to understand what it is that's going on. Same thing with World War II. If you guys look, and if you find out that the Japanese, they were taught military strategy from the Germans for 13 years before World War II. All right, so they understood very well on how to think correctly, and they learned, the triangle back in those days was the United States, the British Empire, and USSR, Russia. All right, so they figured that out, and they looked at everybody's strategies. They learned from the Germans, and then they created their own strategies. So for the United States, the threat was different. All right, the threat was that, the United States, our protection was the Atlantic Ocean. On the other side, our protection is the Pacific Ocean. So we couldn't allow Germany and Russia get together. And we also couldn't allow the Japanese to be able to, expand their empire, because it's a threat to the Western Hemisphere. All right, so we built alliances with the British Empire, and that's how that's what it's all based on. It's like, why specific, these very specific partners that we have, World War I, World War II, and that's how that's played out. All right, and then you move forward to the Cold War. So in other words, those are strategic partnerships. The Cold War, you had Russia, and then they were a threat to the West, and then you had China that could have been a threat to the West. They were communists, and that population scared us. So what did we do through Vietnam? Korean War, Vietnam, all that stuff had to do with keeping the communists in containment. We wanted to keep them away from the Pacific Ocean. So in other words, that anaconda, that same strategy that the North used against the South in the Civil War, that's what we're using against the Russians, anaconda. In fact, the Russians, that's all they talk about, Operation Anaconda, or that's they know what's going on. They know what's being used against them. Okay, so we've that's why you see that blue, and that's why it's in the position that it's in. But what did we do? We went to Kissinger and Nixon, went to China and said, hey, look, how can we break you off? I mean, it's you have a strategic partnership with the USSR. What are they offering you? And it was very, very simple for Kissinger and for Nixon. They just offered them more. It's like, well, what market do you want to be in here? How smart are you? Does it look like the Russians are producing anything? I mean, what are they breaking any records on products and production, or and then you look at the West and you want to be part of this. This is what you want to do. We guarantee you, because we rule the seas, the United States, because this is after World War II, we rule the oceans. That means we guarantee that you can have trade with anybody that's within our oceans. And so that's how we peeled away China from Russia. We had more to offer. All right. So again, it all has to do with strategic partnerships. But you guys, what you're looking at is the definition of history is being reframed correctly for you. All right, so you understand the principles of why history is happening. You're not just reading what happened, because most of them get it wrong anyways. You got to know the why it happened. That's more important than just stringing along a bunch of dates, because that's great. You could probably name off these points in history on what happened, but if you don't know why, then guess what? It doesn't mean anything. It means absolutely nothing. It's a body without a soul. So that's what we're trying to do here. And that's why I love the questions that you guys asked was, the why. So in other words, what's the election coming up? It's what's the most important thing from the people at the top, from Trump's administration to potentially Biden's administration? Strategic partners. Strategic partners. And so you have to understand that concept. You also have to be kind of an alpha on it. So in other words, and you guys, I'm going to throw this out like if I was talking to you my own opinion, but we don't want to do that here at the American Geopolitical Society, okay? I'm just giving you an example on how to think on and how would you use this as a strategy. And we'll move up a little bit more. We'll do a couple more slides here. But if someone came up and said, hey, who do you agree with? I mean, who would you be a strategic partner with? And it all depends. It's a balance. But both are enemies, in my view. Russia, you guys, we're not going to forget the first Cold War. And if we understand the first Cold War, we understand what can happen in the second Cold War. So we definitely know, I mean, we can be a strategic partner, but we are not friends with China. And so my view is, how do you balance that? Back and forth, all right? The other part of that, what if, let's just role play here for a second. What if, you're a genius at geopolitics and somebody from Russia says, hey, we're going to hire you. We want to create a strategy. Well, you'd have the same attitude from Russia. You're not friends with the United States and you're not friends with China. What's their objective? To get out of containment and to have a warm water port. China's objective is just to take over Eurasia and expand their markets. They want to be a trade empire just like the United States, and they need a navy to do that, because what built the British Empire was their navy. What's built the American trade empire and is maintaining the trade empire? It's the United States Navy. If you guys really want to know the truth, people can go back from liberalism, the conservatism, all this stuff, but what's the real threat of the United States? Us losing naval power. That's the true measure of the United States not being the big dog on the planet. When you measure that, then we're probably in trouble. All right. So what's China trying to do? They're doing what England did. They're doing what the United States did. They're trying to build a navy, and they're not even close to matching us, you guys. Not even remotely close. Okay. They're pretty solid land power, but we're not worried about that. As soon as they hit the ocean, we're going to kick their asses, and they know it. And so does the Russians. But again, if you were to go to China, what is China? What's their strategy? They want to take over Eurasia. They want to be able to expand their markets. They want to create a consuming market so they can be isolated completely from the United States if they need to be. So in other words, everybody has to be selfish. That's why I was talking about in the mini course that when I learned in 1991, when I learned the foundations of geopolitics, everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're doing it right. They're doing it correctly. And so again, the question comes, well, what will happen? What could kick off World War III? If everybody's trying to line up some type of strategic partnership and everybody's balancing it, it kind of creates a quagmire. So how could a World War III break out? Well, you guys, my best opinion on that is demographics. Demographics will, population, age groups, that will force it. There's only so, Russia, if they're going to break out of containment, their birth rate is dropping. So if you look at that age they need for military service, guess what? It's disappearing. So there's a shelf life. That'll force things. Same thing with China, same thing with the United States. But if you look at the current administration, what are we doing? We're building strategic partnerships trade-wise with countries that have the best demographics. And so that's kind of how we see the future as the demographics change, and it hurts some countries. And so, in other words, the trading we're in a strategic partnership war with Russia and China, just based on demographics, also. So it's military, it's demographics, and that in turn, determines on trade. So it's very cool to understand this stuff because you can start looking at what's happening and what's at stake, how things are being done from a correct view. So let's move to the next slide. So again, you guys, if you look at this map, the prize, Eurasia, all right, it's all about containing Eurasia is all about strategic partnerships. And it from 1915, let me get my mouse here if you guys can see it, from 1915 all the way to we're up today. This is actually the most important part right here. Southern Pakistan. Russia wants to have a port in southern Pakistan. That's why Russia, if you, in those articles, they were talking about having a strategic partnership. So what could Trump do to facilitate that would help them develop a partnership with Russia? Where they're saying that you need to have India more friendly to us. Now, India buys arms from Russia, but India is not stupid. You know what I mean? They know if Russia could, they would take over. So, and so they're trying to facilitate that type of relationship, which would help in turn ease the tension between Russia's objective is to have a relationship with Pakistan and then also with India so they can build a warm water port in southern Pakistan. All right. And they don't need anybody competing with them or blocking them. So that's why they strategically look at one of the things that Trump can help him do. By the way, it's not what Trump wants to do. It's a suggestion. All right. The BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Trump actually pivot India away from the Russians. He pivot India away from the Chinese. He pivot India away from the BRICS. He did that with trade. He did that with giving them military security. He did the same thing with Brazil. So round and round we go. Again, it's all about strategic partnerships. That's why it's so important to understand what's at stake. So coming up with this election, you have two different ideas on who's going to have the best strategic partnership. But you guys, let's say if Biden wins, that doesn't mean that, what Trump is offering, his administration, is just simply going to go away. This is a battle. You got to understand the Russians, they want to be a strategic partner with the United States because China is a threat. So as long as Russia's there, then their secret service is going to be working in the United States trying to convince people to have a partnership with them. That's why it's not going to go away. Same thing with Biden's group. I mean, if they lose this election, you guys, it's not the end all of elections, all right? But it does start to determine on very important on who our strategic partnership is. So again, the world island. So he who controls the Rimland controls the world island. So that's why it's the prize. Remember that. All right. So here's the thing. What people don't understand, what's confusing in the multipolar world. So that's Russia, Iran, and China, and again the BRICS. All these, it, they're kind of living an illusion. It's pure propaganda because you have people and you can even see this on YouTube. You see people from that, the Chinese are saying that they're fighting the Americans or capitalism or this or that. And then you have somebody from Iran saying, yeah, brother, well, that's where it's coming from. They all see themselves as the multipolar world. All right. But what they don't understand is, again, look, here's, I'll go through this real quick. Russia, war against Atlanticist. And then you look at their Asia strategy, and there it is right in front of you. China to the maximum degree possible to be dismantled. So the Chinese leadership, they're not fooled. All right. So you have the Russians who are very aggressive. They're apex predators. All right. They always have been. And this idea that the multipolar world, they're all friends and family, and no, it's strategic partnerships. So China's a threat, Russia's a threat. For China, Russia's a threat, the United States is a threat, and the EU, by the way. So this is how this works. But let me go down one. Russia should use its special services within the borders of the United States to fuel instability, separation, for instance, provoke ethnic resistance, geopolitical disorder. All right. Well, if the United States is less of a threat than China, then guess what? They can back off on that stuff. And that can help, that's something that they can put on the table and use as a negotiation. So, but here's what people don't understand. If you watch the news and the turmoil going on, it's like, well, who is it? Is it the Russians or the Chinese? You guys, it's both. What's the influence coming out and influencing people? Doesn't matter if it's left or right. It's coming from the Chinese and the Russians. So they both have the same version of what Alexander Dugin talked about. So replace these names. China should use its special services within the borders of the United States to fuel instability, separatism. For instance, provoke ethnic resistance. China should introduce geopolitical disorder into internal American activity, encourage all kinds of movements of extremist ethnicity, sectarian groups, destabilization. That's hybrid warfare. All right, neocortical warfare. But both of them are. That's why it's so important that you guys understand. Because you have people out there that are Trump crazy, and you have people out there. They're not. Nobody's Biden crazy, but people see that he represents their view. All right. But you guys, Russia is not our friend. China is not our friend. They never will be. All right. These guys have been around long before the United States was around. And that's exactly how they look at it. Long term. So they're going to use strategic partnerships to try to get rid of the United States, whether it's a nation state or whether it's the head of a globalist, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's what you guys need to understand. But it will be done through strategic partnerships. So again, the United States needs to keep Russia and China from taking over the Eurasia. And then you have Germany and China, Russia and China, that needs to make sure that the United States doesn't have control over the Rimland. And so it's the same thing, you guys. Every general, whether they're Russian or from India or from China or from the UK, it doesn't matter. They're looking at these maps, all right? It's not political. They're looking at resources and manpower, and then how those can be used against the United States. It's like General Mattis, all right? General Mattis is easy to figure out. If there's a bad guy there, he's going to put 10 good guys there to fight that bad guy. It's very easy math for him. So, that's how it works. That's what's going on. The other thing I want to be able to point out is, remember this, you have people on the left and you have people on the right that disagree with Trump, the neocons, the neoconservatives. So it's not the way that Alexander Dugin and these guys put it, it's liberalism versus conservative. Not necessarily. You have conservatives who believe that China should be the strategic partner. Russia's more of a threat. They're more afraid of Russia getting out of this containment and having a warm water port and being able to have influence over Eurasia than China and its trade empire. So you have to consider that before it's just black and white, Trump versus Biden, conservative versus liberalism, because in the reality it's not. And guess what? Trump camp is right. The neocons are right. And so is Biden's camp. They're right on strategic partnerships. And if you understand the principle of what I'm talking about, it's a coin toss. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where we're at. And that's what you guys need to. But in the future, when you watch what trade blocks that we create or we get involved with, or Russia or China, know that that's what it's always going to be the same thing. Strategic partners, the big prize is Eurasia.